So welcome everyone to our fourth class in the Spiritualism 101 series. This is Spiritualist Philosophy Part 2. And we're very privileged to have as our teacher today, Stephen Vogel, who I'm going to let him actually introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Carol, and I welcome everybody who's here tonight. Taking some time to learn a little bit more about spiritualism. I was synchronistically led to spiritualism, to a spiritualist in 1994, and he kept inviting me to his church. And after a year-long relationship manifested, which he predicted, and ended, I was able to attend the church, and it's the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. I walked in that door in the Halloween weekend, 1995, and I felt just like I was walking into my parents' house. It felt that comfortable and that welcoming. And I started taking classes right away, and Gaiman walked up, shook my hand, said, "Oh, you have good healing energy. Let's get you into some healing classes." And took the right hand of fellowship and became a member on March 31st, 1996, along with Wayne Knoll, Dr. Wayne Knoll, her husband. And I've been a member there for 30 years now. It's my spiritual home. And tonight's subject is something very near and dear to my heart, just as history was a couple weeks ago, natural law. And we'll get into that when we're ready to start the tutorial section of tonight. I'll
Okay.
let Carol
And
go back to our PowerPoint.
I'm going to share that our class is free, but we welcome donations, and there's a link in the chat. And also, if you aren't getting our weekly digest, you can sign up. So, Steve, do you want to go over the format of our class?
Yeah, it's kind of our standard format for these 8 classes. This is the fourth of 8 classes. We'd like to open with a prayer, an invocation. Then the instructor will present the lesson material and take a chair, facilitate any discussion, questions and answers discussion. And if we have time, we might squeeze in a meditation, and then we'll close again with a prayer or a benediction. So that's our format.
Okay.
I would invite the Reverend Carol Caesar, if she would like to lead us in an invocation. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let us pray. Infinite intelligence, thank you for bringing us together for our Spiritualism 101 class on spiritualist philosophy and focusing on natural law. We ask that you inspire our teacher, help us open our minds and our hearts to receive knowledge, and open our minds to be inquisitive, and encourage each one of us to hear information, even if we've heard it before, with new ears, to hear more clearly and understand more clearly the philosophy of spiritualism. And we ask these things in the name of love and light and truth. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, as the title indicates, tonight's tonight's class deals with part 2 of our philosophy. We're going to talk about natural law. We will look at in depth 5 core natural laws. We'll have time to discuss some other spiritualist philosophy, and we'll also entertain questions and discussion. And when I like to give a presentation, I would like people to raise questions when they come up, rather than saving them for the end, writing them, jotting them down, losing them, or whatever. Let's go ahead and either raise your hand physically or with the Zoom reaction, and we'll take your questions when they pop up. I think that's the best time to deal with them. Okay. Spiritualism is a triune entity. It is science, philosophy, and religion. And this comes from material from the NSAC that we're a chartered auxiliary of. It's a philosophy because it studies the laws of nature, natural law, both in the unseen and unseen sides of life. And it bases conclusions upon present observed facts. It accepts statements of observed facts from past ages and conclusions drawn therefrom when sustained by reason and results of observed facts of the present day. So it's a real detailed NSAC spin on philosophy. Thank you. So just a quick overview from our lesson material on natural law. What is it basically? What are we talking about? Well, natural law enhances our understanding of life. It provides continuity between this life and the next. In other words, between the earth plane and all other planes, including the spirit world. And it does that because natural laws apply the same way in both places. Physical world, spiritual world, natural law works the same way. It exists and works the same way in both places. One way of looking at natural law is a nonlinear continuum. That might be a little hard to grasp by some of us physical beings. Rosemary Colorado has described it as a, quote, spiral of circles, which is another way of looking at natural law. Natural law is never ending. It's always in effect. Many natural laws touch upon each other, but each one still has its own differing aspects. And you'll see some of that as we get into some of these natural laws. Each of us physical beings, must examine our own feelings and actions in order to see how natural law is being expressed in our lives. Natural law helps us understand that the universe is not chaotic. It's functioning in an orderly fashion, an orderly manner, and everything is perfectly well in divine order. So let's begin by diving right into 5 of the core natural laws that most authors discuss and that most frequently come up in spiritualist literature. I like to start with the law of vibration. If we could move to that slide, please. The law of vibration. There we go. And this is hard to read. Each of the people who view this video will get a copy of the handouts, including these slides. This natural law of vibration gets us down. It's the closest one that is also found in physics, and actually modern science has finally caught up with it. It basically says that physical solidity is an illusionary appearance, that everything vibrates. Energy vibrates. We know that from electricity and sound and other forms of energy. Matter also vibrates. And if you look at Einstein's special theory of relativity with his mass energy equivalence equation, E equals mc squared, his famous equation, he solved that for energy. He basically said energy was equivalent to mass or matter times the speed of light squared. So it's matter vibrating at the speed of light times the speed of light, which is 186,000 plus miles per second. So if we solve that equation for m, matter or mass instead, we end up with it being equal to E over c squared, which is saying, in other words, that matter is simply energy divided by the speed of light times the speed of light. So matter is simply energy vibrating at a very, very slow rate. So that our really crude physical senses will make my mind believe that this pencil is physical, that it exists in physical reality, when in fact it's millions and millions of atoms and molecules vibrating at a speed slow enough, as energy forms vibrating at a speed slow enough I can feel it with my touch. Physicists have an understanding of wave energy in two forms. They refer to flowing or rolling waves and standing waves. And flowing or rolling waves are what we experience at the beach, with those rollers coming in, or at a large lake with the wind blowing waves to the shore. A standing wave is what we see when we watch water in a stream go over a rock, an underwater rock. The water bubbles up and goes over the rock. That's a standing wave. And in a sense, all matter is a whole series of minuscule standing waves. We can raise our vibration in order to improve spiritual connection, and we can do that with meditation. We can do that with music, with singing like we do in church, and with laughter. All of these items will help raise our vibration. So let's move on to the law of thought. If we could go to that slide, please. The law of thought. Here we go. And that is that in a practical sense, the law of thought instructs us that we create our own lives through our own thoughts. The law of thought focuses energy on our free thinking. It puts the law of love into motion. The law of thought fills our lives with action. And there are a lot of aphorisms that relate directly to the law of thought. You are what you think. There's a famous quote that's often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, cautioning us to be very careful of our thoughts, because our thoughts become our actions. And our thoughts become our words become our actions become our habits, and our habits become our character. So it's always important to remember that thoughts are an energy form. They're a wave energy form. And they have that energy whether we express them in any manner or not. If our brain is thinking a thought, that energy form exists. I'm reminded of our song in our healing supplement at church, Our Thoughts Are Prayers. Take charge of what you're praying. Okay, so that's the law of thought. Another natural law is the law of cause and effect. If we could have that slide, please. There we go. And that law of cause, the natural law of cause and effect, states that every consequence, every result has a precedent. Every consequence has a precedent. In other words, every action has a reaction, which is a very summarized version of Newton's third law of motion in the world of physics. If we're confronted with a situation, we might ask ourselves, how did I react to that situation? How would I have preferred the outcome to have been instead? How can I realign myself to produce a better outcome next time, or maybe even this time if we're in the middle of the situation? With greater flow of energy, of thought, of vibration, there is less tension and better outcomes. Let's look at the law of attraction, something you probably are familiar with. If we could move to that slide. There we go. Thank you. essentially like attracts like. I know we've all practiced with magnets, and we put the same poles together, they push each other apart. But this is how things work in. This is a spiritual law, a natural law that also works in the physical world. We draw energies and experiences to ourselves by affinity. By affinity. This includes both positive and negative energies and experiences. It's a cautionary law. It encourages us to approach everything with greater awareness, to be more present and more aware when we're dealing with things, and to approach things with positive thought, approach things positively. Another way of looking at this is our thoughts are things. And when we focus our thoughts, we can attract greater attention, we can attract greater awareness, and we can use this law consciously for self-improvement and raising our vibration. And we'll come back to that a little bit later in the presentation tonight as a practical application of natural law. And the final core natural law to look at is the law of love. I mean, I'm using the dictionary definition of love here, which is the benevolent affection of infinite intelligence for creation, and the reverent affection due from all of us to infinite intelligence for being part of creation. There's a theory that's arisen that the unseen matter in the universe, the so-called dark matter, dark energy, actually might be the essence of love in the physical universe. There's one of our teachings is, it's the last line here, that the universe is propelled by love. I'm sorry, back up. The universe is propelled by natural law, and it is impelled by love. By impel, I meaning, again, the dictionary definition is impelling is setting into motion. So it's love is the law and the force, the energy that puts things into motion, while natural law is the entity that keeps things in motion. So the universe is propelled by natural law and impelled by love. Love provides the urge, the drive, and the force. In other words, to get off inertia, start moving forward. There are some other important natural laws that a lot of authors will discuss, and we don't have slides for those. One is the law of acceleration, and that simply deals with increasing motion, propelling things forward. It has a very similar counterpart in physics, in the physical world. There is something called the law of harmony, or rhythm, the law of rhythm. And again, everything is in motion, in rhythmic consistency. And you can see how this is related to the law of vibration. There's the law of desire. And desire is a feeling or an emotion that helps us develop thought and thought forms and energy forms. And it actually can direct our spiritual unfoldment. There's the law of compensation, that actions attract corresponding outcomes. And in other words, our actions bring us things. They bring things to us. Again, this is related to the cause of an effect, law of cause and effect. But it does, law of compensation is, if we put out good deeds, good thoughts, good actions, good should come back to us. One way you may have heard this expressed as what you put out comes back to you. Okay. There's also a law of retribution, which says if you put out negative or hurtful or painful things, that's what will be attracted back to you. Another important law, natural law, is the law of truth. That focuses on right living and right action. It basically encourages us to live a good life, a proper life, a right life. And it can become a personal truth, but it may not be found as the truths of others. Maybe someday when we evolve to that point. And then another important law, natural law, is the law of continuity, that things continue both in the physical world and the spiritual world. And it's expressed in spiritualism with our principle that our personal identity continues after the change called physical death. So now I would like to look at spiritualism in general as a philosophy in general. As we looked at in the slide, we discovered that philosophy is the study of why and how things happen. The study of why and how things happen. It comes from the Greek words for love of wisdom, and it can involve and does involve, certainly in spiritualism, the study of things both in the seen and the unseen worlds. We physical beings are part of nature that is seen, even when we can't see many of nature's forces. We can't see wind that's blowing outside. We can see its effect, but we can't see it. We can't see energy. We can feel it if we come in contact with electricity or water power or wind power. We can't see gravity, but it's holding me in my chair right now. It's holding each of us on the surface, the physical surface of the planet Earth right now. But those things exist. Scientists have proven them. They've been able to measure those things, develop devices to measure those things. And the philosopher asks the question why something happens. And then the philosopher studies that subject and develops a theory about it. And then the philosopher tests that theory and explores it. And if it's, again, in Newtonian physics, Newtonian science, if the testing is repeatable and you get the same results, you can actually convert the theory into a law. So let's turn our attention now to the purpose of natural law. It exists. Why does it exist? Well, quite simply, it exists, knowledge of it exists to help humanity acquire wisdom and grow and evolve. Humans are naturally very curious. Sometimes we're very superstitious too. And we seek meaning almost everywhere we go. Humans, throughout the history, became less superstitious with the advent and developments of science. Science could explain things that superstition couldn't, so they threw superstition away. With more and more science, fixed physical natural laws were discovered and developed, explored and tested. As science evolved, physicists began asking more spiritual questions. Physics often parallels spiritual law. As I mentioned, with gravity, inertia, conservation of energy and matter, even in mathematics like sacred geometry. But there are delicate ephemeral energies that exist just beyond physical perception. They exist beyond, again, our 5 rudimentary physical senses, and so far they're modern science is just on the edge of developing devices that can detect some of these energies um, that are really light. They're very high frequency, very delicate energies. The studies of these energies and their phenomena led to the development of spiritual natural laws. Natural law provides a framework of understanding for all of us, but it is our own personal responsibility that requires each of us to test it for ourselves. Some have called natural law the spine of spiritual understanding. And I'll never forget at an SAC convention, John Baumhoff, an old-time spiritualist from New Hampshire, big barrel-chested guy with a mustache. And he would wear a top hat to the convention banquets. He tried to get an amendment passed because our 9 principles are in our national bylaws. And he said we need to take that out of 7 as we obey or disobey nature's physical and spiritual law. We can't disobey physical and spiritual laws. So why do we even encourage our students to do so? But again, sometimes our lessons, whether we knowingly invite them in or not, give us the opportunity to test natural law. And as John, God rest his soul and spirit now, rightly pointed out, we can't violate them. And sometimes they might have some painful lessons learning that, okay? But we are required to test it. That's one of the reasons we came here to Earth School. And finally, natural law is actually the means or agency to perform principle number 3. We affirm that a correct understanding of such expression, and an aside, that expression refers to principle number 2, that we believe the phenomena of nature, both physical and spiritual, are the expressions of infinite intelligence. So we affirm that a correct understanding of such expression and living in accordance therewith constitute true religion. So what principle number 3 is actually telling us is that the physical and spiritual world is an expression of infinite intelligence, and that in order for us to live our best life within it, we need to study it and natural law. Natural law gives us the guidelines to function and live well and function a good life in the physical world, spiritual world. When the late Reverend Lelia Cutler, a past president of the NSAC and pastor of the Memorial Spiritualist Church down in Norfolk, Virginia, natural law was one of her pet subjects. And when she taught it, she would teach a comparison of the historical evolution and development of natural law, both in the physical world of science and in the spiritual realm. So she liked to use the example of the creation of the universe. Okay, so on the science and physical law side, all ancient civilizations and indigenous cultures have some kind of mythology or stories about creation. It was just what they were led to believe, how the world and the universe was created. Copernicus came along in the 16th century with his heliocentric theory that the sun was the center of our solar system and not the earth. And that got him in trouble with the Catholic Church. Again, in the late 16th century, a gentleman named Thomas Digges in England proposed an infinite static universe that always had existed. And this has evolved into what became known as the steady state model, or the steady state theory of the universe. That it has always existed and it's static. Well, subsequent scientists have pretty much proven that wrong. Galileo came around in the 17th century. He studied falling objects by dropping them from the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And he also was the first person He studied all sorts of things. He was a real polymath. But he was the first person to state in writing that the laws of nature are mathematical in format. So he was the first human being to begin applying math to natural law. Kepler came around again in the 17th century, and he described his three laws of planetary motion, how objects revolve around the sun. And Newton built upon that in beginning to get into the 18th century. Newton studied gravity when that apple fell on him and got his attention. And he developed those three universal laws of motion. The third law we've already seen has a counterpart in spiritual natural law. And he studied celestial mechanics, way ahead of his time. Albert Einstein in the 20th century built upon his forerunners and developed his theory of general relativity, his theory of special relativity that has that mass energy equivalent equation, and subsequent theoretical physicists that followed him built upon his work in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, and developed what became known as the Big Bang theory, that the universe was created from a microscopically small entity, a unity, and that it very quickly erupted into the universe. And the term was actually coined in a radio broadcast by an astronomer in 1949. And it's the predominant theory adopted by most cosmologists and cosmogenicists and astronomers today, that the universe was created by the Big Bang, so-called Big Bang, 13.77 billion years ago. And that was proven in 1965 by some astronomical research that proved that from our viewpoint here on Earth, stuff is moving away from us. So it's not a static universe. The stars and galaxies, the nebula that we can detect with our instruments are all moving away from us. So the universe is in motion. And then Lelia would shift gears and look at spiritual law and the parallels of spiritual law. And I would like to go back to events in this country, as she did, back in the mid-1800s, particularly in upstate New York in the so-called burned-over district that is near Rochester, centered around Rochester, New York. There was a lot of fervent activity, and if you were in church on March 15th and heard me talk about Hydesville Day, some of this is repeat, but it applies here, so we'll go ahead and share it here too. So there was a lot of fervent activity in America at that time. There was a lot going on in society. There was the abolition of slavery movement. There was the women's rights movement, the women's suffrage movement. There was the temperance movement. There were labor movements, especially regarding child labor laws and the 8-hour day and a 5-day week. And there were all sorts of other social justice movements in America at that time. A lot going on. And what happened regarding spiritualism happened in Hydesville, New York. It's a tiny little rural hamlet, essentially a T intersection out in the countryside, about 20 miles east of Rochester, just east of Newark, New York. And it happened on March 31st, 1848, which we honor as the advent or birth of modern spiritualism. It was the first time that intelligent spirit communication gained access to ordinary human beings, ordinary common people. The Fox family living in a cottage had physical phenomena that was just driving them nuts. And eventually they discovered that whatever was causing that could see them and hear them. So they thought, well, if it can see it and hear us, let's see if it'll answer our questions. So they developed a code to work with it and discovered that it was the deceased spirit of peddler Charles B. Rosna, or Rosma, depending on the source you look at, who had been murdered in that cabin, that cottage, about 5 years earlier. and was pretty upset by that because he'd been bothering everybody who had tried to rent that place for the 5 years that he was buried in a cellar. Eventually, his remains were discovered, and which proved the mediumship that was developing, and it fostered the movement of spiritualism. Home seances, home spirit communication, home seances spread like wildfire across this continent, across the globe, into Europe, into Asia, into Africa, into Australia. And the spiritualist movement became, as it evolved, it became very diverse and very democratic. The National Spiritualist Association was founded in 1893 to protect mediums in court. And it earned a good reputation. Those free thinkers never lost a case. And during the Red Scare, during the McCarthy era in the 50s, the NSA added the words "of churches" to its title, and became the National Spiritual Association of Churches, to help it gain recognition as a religious organization. So spirit communication and phenomena, especially the physical phenomena, naturally led to philosophical questions of how and why. And so people began studying mediumship, and especially physical and trance mediumship. Often they were people who got into it to debunk it, prove it to be fraudulent, and discovered that the mediums they were testing were legitimate. The phenomena that was associated with their work was true, was not fraudulent at all. It was real. It was actually existent. And so trance and physical mediumship were proven to the public, and still are today, by scientific and with scientific testing. So across its history, spiritualism has evolved into that triune entity, a science of philosophy and religion. It's a science because it investigates and analyzes the manifestations and phenomena that are demonstrated from the spirit world. It's a philosophy, as we already reviewed in the slide earlier in the presentation, because it uses natural law, and it applies natural law and past knowledge to current situations. So it studies things. And it's a religion because it understands the larger questions through science and through philosophy and the study of natural law. And as you see in some of our discussions later on this evening, a lot of these three elements they certainly link up, and sometimes they overlap. So I'm going to take a little bit of a pause in our discussion of natural law and look at other very important aspects of spiritualist philosophy that we haven't discussed in part one. And the first of those I'd like to discuss is the whole subject of death and transition. Is one of the questions most of us humans ask is, what is the meaning of death? Because nobody gets out of this physical life alive. In spiritualism, death is a transition, not an ending. It is literally the law of thought at work. The law of thought is continuing the motion of life, no longer in the physical world as the physical body has passed away, but in the spiritual world as the spiritual being continues to live. Death is simply a change in condition, not an end. Energy is not ending. Again, that comes straight out of physics. That's one of the laws of physics, that energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. But energy can transform. We can change energy, forms of energy. We can change energy into matter, matter back into energy. So death has the appearance of destruction because the physical body does die. It loses its animating element. But it is only a change in form. of the spiritual body who's inhabiting this physical body. Death is a natural part of life and can help each one of us lead a more productive life. Andrew Jackson Davis, one of our founding philosophers and a medium and healer, a very prolific author from the 1800s, called death, quote, a change in situation. And he defined that as an expression of spirit in physicality changing to an expression in the spirit world. Wayne Dyer reminds us that we are, quote, spiritual beings having a human experience. Death can be symbolic also, can have symbolic meaning. It can be symbolic of relationships changing and of lives changing. The person who's making the transition and all those who knew and loved that person. Those lives are changed instantaneously upon transition. Mediums don't actually prove the continuity of life, but they do provide evidence for us to prove it to ourselves. You will hear in church that spiritualism proves the continuity of life. Mediums don't do that. We do it ourselves with the messages we receive. All religions preach the continuity of life. All major religions do. You'll find that in all their theology. Spiritualism is the only religion that actually demonstrates the continuity of life. So it's not an article of faith, it's an article of fact, proven fact. Death, it can be looked at as a question of growth. We incarnate into life to learn here in Earth School, and then we transition into the spirit world to learn new things, other ways. Another purpose of mediumship is to take away the fear of death. A number of studies have indicated the fear of death as a very high fear amongst many human beings. Death actually is a doorway to further expansion. Our personality, our purpose, and our learning all continue in the spirit world. We should remember that people aren't automatically, instantaneously happy upon their death. Well, yes, anything connected with that physical body, the physical ailments and illnesses, the mental and emotional issues, all disappear with the physical body when that physical body dies. So in the spirit world, and this has come back through recorded messages from mediums, trance messages, direct voice messages of spirits from people who've passed into the spirit world and are sharing their experience with those their loved ones through a medium in the physical plane. And they've admitted that there's continued healing in the spirit world. There can be grieving, and there's also learning. Life is limitless, and we simply are here for a while, and then we're elsewhere. The question of reincarnation often comes up in discussions of spiritualist philosophy, and for the record, it's an open question. The NSAC position, and this again is in the NSAC bylaws, that reincarnation the reincarnation theory has not been satisfactorily proven or disproven, essentially through mediumship. We are encouraged to study it and to form our own beliefs. And having been active in the NSAC for almost 30 years now, I've witnessed 2 surveys of NSAC spiritualists whether people believe in reincarnation or not. And every time, because it gets people's interest and it gets them to respond to that survey, every time, both times I should say, that we've had surveys, the results have been 50-50. Half of NSAC members believe in reincarnation, half of it do not. And I literally watched Reverend Lelia Cutler, God bless her. In that first survey, she was a definite no. I don't believe in it. But a few years later, 5 or 6 years later, during the second survey, she was on the side that says, yes, I now do believe. So we're encouraged to study it, to test it, and form our own belief about it. It might be, reincarnation might be some kind of an imprint from the Akashic records, which are supposed to be records out on the astral plane of all lived human lives. According to the mediumship of Robin Hodson and Richard Scholler, as early as March of 2017, the spirit world might disagree with the NSAC interpretation that reincarnation might be a personal thing and that it might actually be up to the individual. Rosemary Calderalo notes that it is very hard to prove reincarnation. There are groups studying it. Spiritualists who don't believe in reincarnation will say, well, that child is speaking for a helping spirit that's very close to them, sharing their life on the earth plane through the child or through the person, whether it's been the person's been hypnotized through a past life regression or whatever. And Rosemary also states that it depends on many, many variables, and includes such things as one's own healing and one's own belief system. Examples, anthropological, sociological examples of reincarnation occur in cultures and societies where reincarnation is a big belief, dominant belief. So we attract our lessons to us, and we repeat our lessons, as some of us have learned the hard way sometimes. We repeat our lessons until we learn what the spiritual lesson is. And there are, again, philosophies and theologies that believe that reincarnation continues until alignment is achieved and the being is perfected. Another question that often comes up during the discussion of spiritualism and its philosophy is the question of miracles. And spiritualism has a pretty simple answer to that. I find it very helpful, that miracles are simply events that are caused by something that we don't understand yet. And again, it could be, miracles could become the food for future studies, future investigation, future natural laws. I want to touch real briefly on the subject of spiritual ethics and personal responsibility. We've already talked about principle number 3 as being a good reason to study natural law and try to live by it. Principle number 6 is our golden rule principle. Aristotle described the ideal person as someone who provides selfless service with goodwill regardless of whatever happens. So that idea, the golden rule, has been with humanity for a long time. And it encourages us, principle number 6 encourages us to start with ourselves first, to do our own work, our own gardening, our own homework, to work on our own souls, to clear our souls, clear our spirits, so that we can be of service to others. We must know and care for ourselves first. Physician, heal thyself. Many modern teachers of spiritual mediumship encourage their students to do their homework, to dig into their shadow, to work on their shadow side, to work on their boo-boos, their faults as they perceive them or as they are revealed to them. Their mediumship always improves whenever they do that. And Our principle number 7, we create our own heavens and hells right here on earth, is our personal responsibility principle. And it encourages us, each one of us, to align our own deeds with our own soul's purpose, to seek that higher road and to try to get up on it and follow it. Now, I'd like to go back and into some of Lelia Cutler's teaching on her pet subject, natural law, and look at the practical applications of natural law. So let's go back to natural law. And I'd like to start looking at how natural law works in mediumship. And again, the definition of mediumship is communication between the earth plane and the spiritual plane, between those of us that are still embodied in physical bodies and those of us who are spirit in the spirit world. As our principle states, our personal identity continues after the change called physical death. However, the spirit world operates at higher frequencies than are found here in the physical world. Again, spirit communicators have indicated that all communication in the spirit world is telepathic. There's very little spoken word in the spirit world at all, telepathic. So it's operating at a higher frequency, higher level of energy. So first of all, let's see how natural law works in giving messages. The medium literally serving in between the communicating spirit and the recipient in a human body. So there's 4 primary natural laws, spiritual natural laws, at work with mediumship. The first is the law of desire. It's the desire, it's the medium expressing the desire to do mediumship, to perform as a medium. The second one is the law of love. That unlocks the door to the other worlds. The third is the law of attraction. That turns the switch. The medium raises their vibration, expands their aura to be a bigger target for the communicating spirit, expands their aura, raises their vibration. And of course, the fourth one is the law of vibration. In order to enable communication, those attempting to communicate with us from the spirit world have to lower their vibration, their vibrational frequency, as the medium has to raise their vibrational frequency. Eventually, the 2 frequencies meet and communication is possible. And we raise our vibration through things like songs in church, and we can also raise our vibration with laughter. And sometimes in public demonstrations, a medium will tell jokes periodically, sometimes about themselves, to raise some laughter in the audience to help raise the vibration and help the medium stay in contact with the spirit world. The communicating spirit, once the vibrational frequencies are aligned, the communicating spirit then impresses the medium with the information. The communicating spirit does not take over the medium, jump in their body or anything like that. It's impressing them telepathically using the 5, what we refer to in spiritualism as the 5 clairs. And these are clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, the medium where the communicating spirit gives the medium visual impressions. There's clairaudience, where the communicating spirit impresses clear hearing or sound effects, sounds in the medium's awareness. There's clairgustance, which is the communicating spirit giving the medium the taste of something, like that wonderful apple pie your mother always made, that she put that one spice in that most other people don't include, but she did. And there's clairolfactance, where the communicating spirit impresses upon the medium a smell or an odor or an aroma, like those wonderful chocolate chip cookies cooling in the window that the grandmother also made. And there's clairsentience, the 5th one, which is clear feeling, where the communicating spirit impresses upon the medium emotional feelings. In addition to these 5 physical sense clairs, there is also something called claircognizance, which is defined as clear knowing. And that's where the communicating spirit impresses something strongly enough on the medium that the medium knows that it's going to have to be taken, that there's no going around it or going back from it. Claircognizance. So Lilia always reminded us that we must remember that spirit messages are the opinion of the spirit world. They are not must-do directives or instructions or dictates. If Uncle Harry was a failed horse bettor and went to spirit, you wouldn't necessarily take his advice coming through a medium on which horse to best bet in the 5th during the Preakness. So again, the medium will often, the communicating spirit often provides the medium with a physical of their physical description. Sometimes it's how they want to be remembered. It may not be how they were at death, at their physical death, but it may be how they want to be remembered. Sometimes it's in the prime of their life. So the medium will receive some kind of physical description, and sometimes a relationship with the recipient, and that those elements are to help identify the communicating spirit with the recipient. Spirit guides sometimes are present during a demonstration of mediumship, but NSAC Spiritualism advises us not to give descriptions or messages from spirit guides. We are encouraged to give messages of deceased loved ones, people who walk the earth plane and are related to the recipient, either as a friend or a family member. And in fact, a medium giving a description of a spirit guide might inadvertently limit that spirit guide, impose an inadvertent limit on the spirit guide. It's up to the individual, the recipient, to develop a personal relationship with that spirit teacher or helper. That a relationship that doesn't box in either the student or the spirit helper. And that is like developing a friendship here on the earth plane, with repeated contact, with meditation, and working with that teacher to develop a friendly relationship, a working relationship with them. Sometimes the length of mediumship messages will vary, and one might ask if there's a greater plan or a greater purpose for mediumship. We're encouraged to listen to every mediumship message that is given in a church service or in a public demonstration, because often there are threads and elements of the message that apply to many of us in the congregation or the audience. So sometimes you might, if you're sitting in a congregation or audience, you might wonder, well, is that love to all of us? Or is that transformation just for one person, the recipient? So mediumship does offer us a chance to exercise our free will discipline, because we do believe that mediumship, as all spiritual gifts, as one of all spiritual gifts, is available to everyone. In the Christian Bible, Jesus said, all this you can do and more, when he was discussing his gifts, his phenomenal gifts. So it gives us a chance to exercise our free will through the development of discipline, when to invite spirit in. If spirit tries to get your attention and you're busy, just say, not now. I'll sit with you in 3 hours. I'll make a date and we'll sit together in 3 hours. So inviting them in, or stepping back, or closing down. So let's turn our attention now and look at how natural law works in receiving messages, in receiving mediumship messages. Again, 3 laws are at work, 3 of the same laws that we discussed in giving messages. the law of desire. I'm in the audience, I'm in the congregation. Uh, the medium will come to me and ask if they can work with me. Yeah, sure, I want to hear from a deceased loved one. So there's the law of desire. There's the law of love. There's usually, there's quite often at some level a loving relationship between the communicator and the recipient. And the law of vibration. Again, I've got to perk up and pay attention if the medium comes to me, and be aware. I must open my heart, open my awareness up to receiving the message, and then to stay open and absorb the message as it's being spoken. And quite often, when a recipient is able to do that, they begin to see a bigger picture. They begin to learn things about the communicating spirit. They learn things about themselves and how things are happening in the world. I'd like to move our discussion now into another application of natural law, and that is how natural law is at work in spiritual unfoldment and spiritual development. Lelia liked to refer to Hoberman spheres, Hoberman spheres. You can look them up. They are kinetic structures that open up and close that were originally patented by artist, engineer, architect, and inventor Chuck Hoberman in 1990. And they teach us that what we think and what we see is not always what it is. It encourages us to look at the bigger picture. We can use meditation not only for relaxation, which has scientifically proven benefits, but we can also use meditation to raise our vibration. And if we can raise our vibration and see beyond that initial appearance of what we think is and get that bigger picture, we often discover in our own personal lives that wherever we are at the moment is where we're supposed to be. I'm going to reference a book entitled The River of Life by the Reverend Marilyn Autry. She's an elderly spiritualist, NSAC spiritualist, who used to be a distant member of our church, the CSE. She lives in Florida, and she's transferred her membership to a church closer to her home in Florida. Marilyn Autry, the last name is spelled A-W-T-R-Y. She's a prolific author, written a lot of good stuff. In The River of Life, she lists natural law, obviously, is one of her pet subjects too. She lists 111, 111, which is an angelic number in some fields, 111 natural laws. She lists 35 physical natural laws, most of which she drew from physics and chemistry. And she also lists 76 spiritual natural laws. We're not going to go into all 76 tonight. You can get a copy of the book and look those up and study those, improve your life with that encouragement. But regarding unfoldment and development, Marilyn Autry identifies 7 natural laws that are important to spiritual unfoldment and development. The first that she identifies is something called the law of soul evolution, that we raise our consciousness to higher levels in order to manifest what we desire. If we want a better life, a more peaceful life, a more abundant life, we might need to do some work and raise our consciousness to a higher level and begin trying to apply some of those natural laws we discussed. The second law she points out as being important to unfoldment and development is the law of personal responsibility, principle number 7. And that law actually is defined as pointing out to us that our real purpose in life, physical life, is to unfold our own soul and develop our own physical and spiritual gifts. And by taking responsibility for our own actions, thoughts, words, and actions and deeds, we begin to align ourselves with our soul's purpose. The third law that she points out is the law of awareness. And that law teaches us that our intuition, our gut or our heart feeling, is our gateway to success, not what our ego is telling us in our brain, our mental brain, but what's in our heart brain. Our intuition is our gateway to success. The fourth law that Marilyn mentions is the law of attraction. And we've already discussed that in more detail. And simply to repeat, we are drawn to each other, persons, people, places, or things, events. We are drawn to each other by our affinities, and these occur both positively and negatively. So, unfoldment and development, we hope we would be thinking positive thoughts. The fifth law involved with unfoldment and development is the law of desire. It helps determine how we think and how we act. And some of the aphorisms you might have heard that are related to the law of desire are release what no longer serves you or is helpful, let go, and you'll find a way. Again, it involves some self-work, some self-study. The sixth law is the law of thought, because the law of love might have set us into motion. The law of thought is going to propel us forward. And of course, the law of vibration is related to that. So we'll attract the teachers to us who will bring us what we may have just about figured out is what we need to study next. There's another aphorism that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That often happens amongst us. So why do we want to unfold? Well, the basic reason is, most of us have had challenges in our lives. Some of them have been very difficult challenges. So one purpose in unfolding and developing is to better ourselves and our spiritual progression. I'm always reminded of the advertising slogan that General Electric developed: progress is our most important product. And each of us is a work in progress. None of us are done. We certainly aren't done when our physical body dies, because we continue progressing in the spirit plane. There are two kinds of spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts. There are physical gifts, and there are spiritual gifts. There are two kinds of spiritual gifts. Some are physical, some are spiritual. So physical gifts involve developing greater sensitivity and touch with material things, material energies, material objects. It's often referred to as psychism. And it's a fairly common gift, psychism. And of course, the other spiritual gifts is spiritual gifts themselves, primarily mediumship, and that includes healing. And mediumship is simply developing a greater sensitivity to touching spiritual energies, involving connection with spiritual energies. And there's a slogan you will hear, a phrase, a sentence you'll hear in spiritualism a lot, especially as you study mediumship. All mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. And in order to develop mediumship, a person needs to develop both their physical gifts, their psychism, and their spiritual gifts. We all have spiritual gifts. Spiritualism believes that they're available to all of us. Every single human being has spiritual gifts. but it is up to us, individuals, and our own free will choice whether we want to or choose to develop some of these gifts, all of these gifts, or none of the gifts. As I said, spiritual healing is also a spiritual gift and a form of mediumship. Healing is governed primarily by the law of one, another natural law, that discusses the unity of all life, physical and spiritual. It simply documents in law form that the universe is oneness, that we are part of the universe. There was a phrase one teacher said that we are a unit of unity. Oneness eliminates the separation, the sense of separation, the illusion of separation. Because we're in physical bodies and we have these kind of limited, rudimentary five senses, we often think, well, I don't have any connection to the five of you in this Zoom room, but we do, because we're all threads of the same diverse tapestry. We're all part of the universe. We're all part of that oneness. There's a wonderful Rumi quote that you are not a drop of water in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop of water, which again reminds us of the oneness, the unity that we're all very much a part of. There's a book entitled The Natural Law in the Spiritual World. Natural Law in the Spiritual World. It was written by Henry Drummond in 1883. So it's in the public domain now, and you can actually download a free copy on the internet. Finally, a question that often comes up in the discussion of spiritual philosophy gets into good and evil and the need for protection. It's the question of protection against disparate energies. In other words, energies that are less evolved or less than positive. And spiritualist teachers will inform you that your intention provides your basic protection. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? If it's to serve others and bring good into the world for the highest, best, and truest good of others, then yes, let's go ahead with it. But if it's not, you might be opening yourself up to some negative influences, the law of attraction. There's also the prayer of protection that was developed by poet James Dillett Freeman in 1940 for the Unity Church. I can share that with you right now. Quote, "The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever God is, wherever we are, God is, and all is well." The 23rd Psalm also functions as a good form of protection. And finally, like we did tonight, we opened in a prayer. When you open an event or something in prayer, a reading, a healing, whatever, a service, it invokes divinity, it invokes infinite intelligence. And it's there with like gangbusters. And it is often why we end a service or an event sometimes with a benediction, like we will tonight, is to thank infinite intelligence for that presence, for that involvement, for that protection, and release our guardian spirits at least, so that we can all go away in a protective fashion. That pretty much concludes our presentation tonight. You'll get those slides as a handout. You'll also get another 2-page handout identifying some other natural laws. We could take questions now, or Carol and Miriam have prepared some slides with some other spiritualist philosophy topics that are mentioned by subject with a one or two line treatment. We could open the floor up for some questions, or we could look at some of those. We could also take a
I
comfort
say we
break.
might want to take a little comfort break
Thank you.
for 5 minutes or so. And if anyone joined us late, if you could help us with attendance by putting your full name and email address and phone in the chat so we can take attendance. And as I mentioned before, our class is free, but we welcome donations, and I'll put that in the chat again for everybody. So the link is there as well. So could we take a like a 5 minute comfort break? Would that be okay?
Please, please.
Okay.
So it's 8:17 according to my computer. So let's be back at
And we're back.
okay. I do want to thank everyone for your patience in listening to me for almost an hour and a half, an hour and a quarter, and being in your patience. So thank you. If nobody immediately has a question, let's go ahead and. Oh, I do see Susan. Okay, go ahead, Susan.
Thank you very much, Steve. When you talk about scientifically proven, I don't quite understand that, because isn't the scientific method uh, prescribed, proscribed, I don't know which word, with certain steps, and like you think about double blind studies and
Yeah,
so on.
yeah.
Could you address that, please?
Thank you. That's a good question. Um, that's been the bone of contention for a lot of scientists who have studied mediums and spiritualist phenomena, because the Newtonian scientific method requires it to be repeatable, to be measurable and repeatable. Okay, and again, we're dealing with these ephemeral, delicate energies that most can't even be detected, let alone measured. So yeah, um, in Arthur Conan Doyle's book on the history of spiritualism, he shares a lot of the research that was done by the primary prominent investigators in the 1800s, in the 1900s, of spiritualists, of phenomena, of mediumship and phenomena, and with physical phenomena, it's hard to it's hard to repeat. But like ectoplasm, for example, there were several circles where the communicating spirits that produced the ectoplasm informed the sitters in the circle that they could uh, um, either turn a red light on or sometimes even the room light and take a picture of it. They were allowed to collect samples of it in several circles so that it could be scientifically analyzed. There's that. But with the physical phenomena, like the Fox sisters, for example, in the demonstration at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, a year or so after, year and a half after Hydesville Day, they were taken into a private room and strip searched by women from the audience, a committee of researchers, women from the audience, to make sure that they didn't have noisemakers or any devices in or on their body to make the rapping sounds. And they were studied by doctors during the demonstrations, and they got affidavits of people that said that the knocking sounds were coming from the wooden pillar at the back of the hall or the door into the men's room. I mean, the sounds were emanating from physical objects that weren't anywhere near the two girls that were demonstrating. And with physical phenomena, it's been fairly easy to eliminate fraud, just like it has been fairly easy to prove fraud in the fraudulent mediumship that has developed, because there's money available in a physical seance. Even today yet. Harry Houdini prided himself in debunking a lot of fraudulent mediums. Um, you know, he didn't dismiss the subject, he didn't dismiss it, but given his skills and abilities, he could prove fraud where it existed. Now, with mental mediumship, that's a separate issue, as we discussed in class tonight, because the spirit world is lowering their vibration enough to connect with the medium who's raising their vibration enough to allow communication. And with the studies in Gary Schwartz's really well done University of Arizona books on mediumship and healing now, he created triple, quadruple, multiply blinded studies where the mediums didn't know who they were sitting with. They weren't in the presence of a sitter. And sometimes the recipients were across the country or around the world that they were reading for. And every statement was documented, taken down, transcribed, and documented, and then tested by the recipient. True or false, true or false, true or false, or I don't know. And in the 6 really well-known mediums that he tested, including our own founding pastor, Ann Gaiman, an international, a medium of international repute, their percentages of accuracy in every phase of the study was incredible. None of them were 100%. No medium is ever 100% accurate. But some of their averages were up in the 80 and 90% accuracy levels. So he was able to develop, not through repeatability, but he developed a measurement scheme that convinced other people that these mediums are the real deals. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and I see that it bears study.
I'm sorry?
I said I see that it does, and I see that it bears study.
Yes, thank you.
I've written down all the names of the books that you recommended, so
They were recommended to me
thank you.
by good teachers. There's a healing effort underway right now, primarily organized through Robin Hodson. He's an English medium, an independent church leader. He's currently president of the International Spiritualist Federation, which the NSAC is a founding charter member of the ISF. So it's essentially our international religious organization. And it's he has called it Spiritual Trance Healers United. And each one of the healers involved, there's about a half a dozen circles right now that are doing this at least weekly. They receive training from him. So each one of us has gotten the same training to use the same technique to raise our vibration and make ourselves available to go hold space out on the astral plane for distant trance healing. In other words, I get into an altered state and ask my teachers, my helpers, to take my awareness to patient XYZ, wherever they are. And I'm basically there holding space. Trance healing is a form of spiritual healing where the medium simply invites in trance healers, doctors, medical technicians, medical specialists from the spirit world who know what's wrong with the patient and are best able to work with that patient's conditions or illnesses or whatever. And I'm basically out there on the astral plane with the energy from the recipient, holding space while we invite in those entities, those beings. There have been some remarkable events documented. Robin has been trying to have us fill out experience forms where we share our personal experiences while we've been doing it. And he's got before diagnoses and prognoses from doctors for each of the patients. And there have been some remarkable, miraculous curings of cancer, of healing. People that the medical community literally gave up on and said, here, we're going to put you in hospice and put you on palliative care because there's nothing we can do for you. You've got weeks to live. So he's set this up so that it can be used as material for a future study. Okay. We haven't been able to find anybody yet, but the material is existing. So it's something that continues the science. There's a science fund in NSAC that can fund research. A lot of academic researchers don't want to touch it because it could imply bias. If we're paying for the research, then, well, the researcher must have done what we wanted. Okay, so it's a touchy subject, but there are independent people out there trying to do their best to study the phenomena as scientifically as is possible. Thank you.
You have another question?
Yes, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. I am wondering how one becomes the recipient of that type of healing that you just described. Do you have a,
Well,
you
there's
don't have to tell me tonight, but if you could refer me to something that we could maybe talk about later or,
okay. There are a number of ways you can ask for healing. You can put your name on our
Mhm.
list of recipients for healing
Right?
because several of us get that. We pray for these people and send them healing, send them divine light, healing energy, multiple times a week.
Hmm.
So there's that. There's healing lists all over the place. Robin has people. There's an intake form,
Okay.
and thank you, Susan, for echoing the same question. There's a he's looking for critical cases,
Yeah.
okay, where an intervention like this might be the grain of sand that tips the balance in favor of the patient. So there's an intake form. There's a spiritualist minister out in Illinois named Nancy Ryle, Ryal, two L's. Anyway, yeah, two L's. We can give you her email address.
Okay.
She's taking intakes form. It requires some documentation.
Mhm.
It requires a waiver, of course,
Right.
to keep us all protected legally, and it requires a photo. Because what we do in the session is, we agree who we're going to work on tonight. We'll put their photo up and study it for a few minutes to again get our awareness, in alignment with that person's physical form.
Hmm.
Then we'll do a particular induction to get into an altered state and go do our healing.
Does the photo need to be a full body?
Oh no, just a
Face?
headshot. A headshot's all we need.
Okay.
So
So
that's
spell Robin's last name for me?
sure, certainly. It's HOD as in Delta, SON.
Okay, I got it right.
Yeah, Hodson.
Hodson.
He's an Englishman. He lives in Seaford, England,
Hmm.
on the south coast, and he's the current president of the independent spiritual center there called Seaford Spirit. And he does online. You can visit his. He does a weekly demonstration of mediumship with invited mediums. Really good British, English, Scottish, Irish mediums, Welsh
Okay.
mediums, and does an in-person service I think every other week in his center.
Okay,
So,
good. Thank you.
okay. Other questions? Well, if not,
I was going to say, if somebody wanted to learn more about natural law, are besides the books you mentioned, is there something more you would recommend?
well, there's the Spiritualist Manual, which discusses natural law, including some of the ones we discussed tonight in more detail. And there's at least, let me count, at least at least 9 pages on philosophy alone. And it goes into religion and a big long section on mediumship, another big section on healing. It's a good it's if you're interested in learning more, I would recommend the Spiritualist Manual. It's available through the bookstore at the NSAC headquarters up in Lilydale, nsac.org. It's very affordable, and if you're drawn into further study, then there is something called the Morris Pratt Institute, which used to be a seminary for spiritualists in Whitewater, Wisconsin, my home state. And it's lost. They had to sell the building during the Depression, and they converted the instruction to what was then a correspondence course, a 30 lesson correspondence course, which fills 3 binders. It gives you an idea of the detail. And you do a lesson, you answer a bunch of questions, do an essay, send it off to a grader, a reader. And I believe the process has been modernized, hasn't it? Thank goodness, Carol. So that they make use of modern technology now. And in order to become credentialed, there's 4 credentials offered through the NSAC. They require studying parts or all of the MPI lessons. There's a licentiate minister, which Carol went through to become an ordained minister. There's the commissioned spiritualist healer, and that only requires parts of the MPI lessons. There's a certified medium, which again requires other parts of the MPI lessons. And there's the national spiritualist teacher, or minister, ordained minister, LMOM, and NST require studying all of the lessons and being tested. You have to acquire affidavits for healing and mediumship. You'll be tested by the board to get your certificates. And you'll also be given an in-person or online examination with the board, the National Board of Trustees, for NST and or LMOM. So it's a pretty rigorous process that is comparable to what other people go through in established religions. Carol, dare we go through some of those other slides with the quick hits on other elements of spiritual
Sure.
philosophy?
Let's do it. There they are.
So again, one of the things that really appealed to me when I walked in the door there at CSE was that there were no references to God, the Father, the Father, Mother, or anything like that. It was infinite intelligence, impersonal, omnipresent, omnipotent. Universe, we've discussed that tonight, the evolution of humanity. Each of us, 6 individuals here tonight, are part of that evolutionary process. We're raising our awareness, raising our consciousness to help humanity evolve into higher states. Our duty on Earth, do the best job we can. Study, develop our character, harmonize with nature towards spirituality. Okay. Next, the oneness. We've already talked about that tonight. We're all, one way or another, we're all working toward the highest, best, and truest good of humanity, the betterment and upliftment of all people. Again, it's very egalitarian, very democratic. The spirit world does recognize our individuality here in the physical, in the spirit world, and we continue to develop. We've already talked about matter and spirit being correlated.
Susan has her hand up with the question.
Okay, yes, Susan, thank you.
Regarding God, or the term God, how do we share our faith in as spiritualists with those who believe firmly in God and Jesus? And what's common? How can such a person understand what we are believing without having to have their beliefs threatened?
It depends on the individual and their own personal beliefs and the rigidity or not of the theology that they were raised in or that they're accepting at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
For example, my 2 closest friends at work in the last 25 years of my paid work environment were a German Catholic from Kansas and a gentleman who was born in Burma raised Buddhist, was there during the Japanese occupation. Most of his family had converted to Islam, and he was attending an extremely conservative church in Bethesda, Lutheran church in Bethesda. I showed them our 9 principles because they were sure I was consorting with the devil and I was going to rot in hell, right? And they looked at the 9 principles and they all got real serious. It's like, I can't find anything in here that I don't agree with. So, I mean, infinite, the divine, the Great Spirit has many, many names. Virtually every religion calls it something. Judaism refers to it as Jehovah, or the name that can't be said. Islam is Allah. And, every religion has referred to infinite intelligence by some name that their culture would accept. So it would depend on, that person's understanding, how deeply versed they are in their theology. Most people, like my 2 friends at work, were pretty studied, and they could see the universality in our 9 principles that could have
I
come
was
from.
having this conversation with my nephew yesterday,
Okay.
and I think it depends on the degree of openness of the other person
Yeah.
to that I believe also there are many paths to the same destination.
Yeah.
And my nephew and others, my sister, in fact, believe that their way is the only way, or their belief system is the only belief system. And so I can't, arguing is not of any use. I'm really seeking common ground.
Yeah.
And you provided your idea, having them look at this, at the our principles. In fact, and I'm not trying to convince.
No.
I'm only asking to be understood myself and to understand what they believe.
Absolutely. Spiritualism does not proselytize. You will not find me on the corner in Falls Church holding my manual and trying to convert people to spiritualism. Okay, we don't do that. We allow individuals to get to a place in their unfoldment and development where something in that building appeals to them, and they'll walk in the door. Okay, or they'll look it up and they'll find us.
Thank you.
Like you said, one of the teachings I've received is that all paths exist here on the earth plane for those who need those paths. They all go back to, that oneness. I mean, when I at work that day on Monday, September 11th, 2001, I walked outside and I watched the plane slam into the second tower in New York. I instantly knew that those martyrs, once I found out, who had caused the plane crash, were all going into heaven or the spirit world with the people they had just murdered. And they probably had a big awakening in that process. But again, if their views were very narrow and rigid, they were the only ones going to paradise. Okay, those other people couldn't possibly go to paradise. But yeah, it depends on the individual and their openness. And as we know, some of the, there are a lot of recovering Catholics at CSE. There was a recovering Buddhist at CSE. There are people recovering from the religion of their earlier years. Good question. Let's see. We've also talked about music and harmony, the octaves of natural law, and again, some of the scientists got into science by studying music and what happens when you cut a string in half and half again and half again on your stringed instrument. Moral status after death. We're taught in spiritualism that at our transition, we transfer into the spirit world at the same level of development that we've been able to achieve here in the earth plane. So we encourage people to study as much as possible, to do as much as your homework as possible while you're here in earth school. Let's go to the next slide, Carol. Oh, yes, absolutely. The law of compensation. If we do good deeds, good will come back to us. The law of retribution. If we do some nasty stuff, that's what will come back to us. Manifestations. Well, spirit does manifest itself on earth and in various ways. Sunday we heard how Sharon Williams's deceased stepfather spoke her name aloud, loud enough that she heard it with her physical ears, checked every room in the house, and went to the front door. And he'd been in the spirit world for 2 days and just wanted to let her know she wasn't alone. He hadn't left her. Again, we're taught to test spirit. When I confronted a teacher in a trance state, in a shamanic trance state, who had shapeshifted into a known Native American, and he answered both questions that I had taken to the upper world of teachers to get answered for homework before I even thought of the questions, and right in my face. I mean, he was like nose to nose, which blew me away in my trance state. He started walking away, dismissed me. And the spiritualist in me kicked in and said, well, wait a minute, you got to test him. You got to make sure it's who he seems to be. It is not something else. Again, the thought hadn't even finished in my brain in an altered state. He turned around in my trance experience, got back and nose to nose, and he gave me 3 pieces of information about his physical life on Earth. I had learned about it in grade school. He was related to Wisconsin. And but there were 3 things I'd never heard about. And as soon as I got done with that, and then he dismissed me. I got places to go and things to do and people to see up here. You can find your own way back to ordinary reality, Steve. Thanks, bud. Thanks. Thank you, sir. And I immediately got into Wikipedia and looked him up. And I'll be damned. There were the 3 things he mentioned were in there that I had never heard of. They were in his article. And the 4th article was that he had begun working in trance through an African-American medium in Wisconsin, and she had developed a whole dozen churches around his trance mediumship. So, yes, test it. Don't just accept it, test it. Okay. Inspiration, yeah. We've heard people speak from the platform at church. They aren't looking at notes. They aren't looking at prepared speech. They are being inspired by the spirit world, by their teachers, by whatever homework they've done to share with us during their address at church. It's always available. Thank you. Next, okay, mediumship. Examples of mediumship occur everywhere in all cultures. It's littered throughout the Bible, Christian Bible. And it's a source, a lot of what we learned about philosophy has come through mediumship. Some really well-known pioneers who would get up on the platform, get into an altered state, and would begin to address the audience on subjects they had no training in. Some of the subjects they didn't even know existed. And a lot of the philosophy has come through, our principles have come through that technique. Children, quite often children will come through in message work, and they continue to grow. Okay. I think that's, yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I think that's Nancy's personal site for spiritual work, okay? If you connect with her through that, she'll be able to direct you towards getting a potential patient enrolled in the STHU. Children will quite often come back and let the recipient know that they have continued to grow and develop in the spiritual world. Aborted children have even come back and thanked their mothers for giving them that just brief touch of physicality that was all they needed. All they needed was to be in that womb for X number of days or weeks. And that like got their ticket punched. And they come back with gratitude. And sometimes share with development that makes that mother proud that she helped birth that child into the spirit world. Again, all of this is attainable by all through our progression. Oh, Stephanie, I'm so sorry to hear that. We did too in my married life. And I'll just share a story. Our oldest child was my daughter Heidi, who had her, oh, good. I'm glad to hear that you persisted. Okay, congratulations. Um, Heidi had her mother's looks and her dad's brains. Okay, just to be proud. And then we had a miscarriage, and then 2 years later, our son was born, and he was a jock, which has none of his dad's genes whatsoever. Okay, just a multi sport jock. Good head. And our daughter's come back through a medium one time and said that she had met her brother in the spirit world, and he was a lot like me, Peter, than he was like you. Nah. So she was able to meet him in the spirit world. So thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. So we're here to learn, to live, to love, and to share our gifts. Absolutely. Hiding human divinity again. That goes back to the oneness, because each of us has the spark of divinity within us. In the Christian Bible, Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, and he alludes to the fact that it's buried, it's hidden. It's hidden in our hearts. Okay? So each one of us has that spark of divinity. We're all part of infinite intelligence. We're all part of the universe. And it's up to our job to do the inner work and get in there and fan that spark to nice brightness. Thank you. Next slide, please. That it?
It's the
Okay.
last slide.
Okay. Thank you. Before I turn the evening over to Carol, I don't think we have time for meditation tonight.
Unless
But
it's a 2-minute meditation.
I'll leave it up to you. Before I turn it over to her to a possible meditation and a benediction, are there any final questions? And if not, I want to thank all 5 of you for joining us tonight. And I want to thank everybody who views this video in the future too. Thank you for joining us tonight. I wish you the very best of success on your exposure to natural law and your own personal unfoldment and development. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I will say it was an excellent class, which kind of reminded me of a lot of things I was very interested in years ago, like a refresher course. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry.
And Susan has her hand up.
Okay.
Will the chat appear in the public document? Okay, no. Thank you very much.
So Stephanie's privacy has been and confidentiality has been confirmed. Thank you.
As well as our email addresses.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again, Carol.
All right. Well, we won't have the 30-second meditation this time. We'll have one next. So I just wanted to mention that, well, I tell you what, we'll do our closing prayer and then we'll stop the recording and then we can have it like, 2 more seconds. I just wanted to tell you upcoming things. So just so you are all aware, our next Spiritualism 101 class is actually in 3 weeks. We have to wait to June 9th, where we'll be talking about physical death and the continuity of life. And then June 23rd, the spirit world. So lots of good things coming up. And in July, healing and mediumship. So lots of wonderful, cool things to talk about in the future. So let's just take a deep breath together and just realize how grateful we are that we were able to be here together as we pray. Infinite intelligence, bless each one of us as we begin each day knowing that we are on our spiritual path, knowing that we are learning more and more how to embrace natural laws and use the spiritual and physical laws in our lives so that we are going with the flow. Bless each one of us as we leave here today, filled with your love and your light. And so it is. Amen. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.